Alright, we can finally do this video. 2019 is officially here, and as always on this YouTube channel, we will do some PlayStation predictions, what I think Sony will do as a company with the PlayStation brand for all of 2019, and we'll also grade myself for my predictions last year. Let's get started. Now, as I've mentioned in prior videos, this is going to be a very exciting year for a number of reasons. Not only are we getting many PS4 exclusives that are finally going to get released that we've been waiting a very long time for, but we're also sort of anticipating next-gen reveals at some point from both Sony and Microsoft. So it's going to be really busy for sure, and I'll try to get a little more outlandish with some of these predictions. That's why I always have so much fun doing these. But first, we will grade myself from last year. So I'll leave a timestamp right here. If you want to jump right to the 2019 stuff, go right ahead, but for now, we'll grade myself on my accuracy from last year. I think I did all right, but you tell me, so we'll get into it right now, and as always, we start off with sales predictions. That's always the first thing we do, and so last year, actually, I predicted that at the end of 2018, cumulative total worldwide sales for PS4 would be at 90 million units, Vita would be at 16.6 million units, and PlayStation VR 4.8 million units. And the results are, well, so PS4, we don't have firm numbers. Earlier in November, I believe, mid-November, the official number for PlayStation 4 was 86 million units. And you have to figure over the holiday season, so that's the rest of November and December. They sold anywhere from 3 to 4 million consoles. We don't have firm numbers, but I would have to guess it's somewhat close to 90 million. I'm hoping that I'm kind of like dead on accurate, but VG Charts is reporting 89.8 million units, so you know, it's give or take with VG Charts. Certainly we don't have an official number from Sony, but I'm hoping that I'm relatively close and dead on the money with that one. Vita is being reported at 16.1 million units. Now, given Vita sells in such low numbers, and sure, Sony's never given us official numbers, I'm also assuming VG Charts is within a somewhat reasonably close, you know, sort of like a close amount, right? So that's not really super close, super accurate, because we're already guessing in terms of very low numbers. And PlayStation VR, this one's also a bit interesting because Sony announced that PlayStation VR was at about 3 million units in, I believe it was August. So that was the last official number we got from Sony. And so you have to figure if they're at 3 million at August, you know, they maybe sold anywhere from another 700,000 units, because they're probably going to sell much more units over, again, the holiday season, November, December. It can't be that much more. So I'm going to figure it's around 3.7 million, which, again, that would be certainly a little bit off, well, a lot off, more or less. It was tough because when PlayStation VR came out and we added PSVR predictions into this, my total shot in the dark was 6 million units, and of course that was not even remotely close. And we realized just kind of how low in volume it sells, so I guess I'll have to be a little more conservative in my prediction in terms of that. Now, my number 2 prediction was that PlayStation 3 manufacturing would cease, and PlayStation Vita, either shipments or manufacturing, one or both, obviously, that would also come about in 2018. And so I was actually wrong on both of these. Here's why. I didn't realize, actually, at the time that I made that prediction, that technically PS3 manufacturing already ceased in 2017, and that was in Japan. I believe Japan was the last territory where shipments had finally been halted. And I remember that at the time, very specifically, because the news story sort of floating around there was that shipments were ceasing, not necessarily manufacturing. So that's why I made that prediction at the start of 2018, because that was in September, I believe. So at the start of 2018, I said, okay, well, 2018, it's PS3's over. So I guess it's been over, so I'm wrong on that one. And with PlayStation Vita, Sony recently announced, not just like a few months back, I believe, that PlayStation Vita shipments and manufacturing would cease in 2019. So actually that is also off. They're still doing it just for Japan, and Japan, of course, would be the last territory because that's the only place where the system has any sort of life breathing into it. So that prediction was also wrong. Number 3, Dreams reviews and sells poorly. Guess what? I'm wrong on this one because it never came out. The game was slated to come out in 2018, and as 2018 kept trudging along and we never got the game and we never heard from Media Molecule, they then promised a beta in 2018, and we were still wondering when's that going to come, because now it's getting into November, and then at the very last minute they finally announced a beta, and they're even announcing a further semi-open sign-up beta right now in January. So keep in mind, actually, if you want to play Dreams, you might want to go ahead and do that. But, so yeah, I can't be right about that one because the game's not even out. Number 4, PlayStation 5 internal rumors begin, and what I meant by that is the internals of the hardware. We'll start hearing what the system might have baked inside of it, right? We might have an idea of GPU, CPU, just any sort of features, controller, whatever, right? I basically said 2018 is going to be the beginning of PlayStation 5 rumors. And sure enough, if you've been following this channel, you know that is very much so true. We have a number of rumors floating around with PlayStation 5 regarding PlayStation VR hardware being baked into the console, them going with AMD, the Ryzen 8 core, the controller might have some sort of camera or touchscreen on it at some point or another, right? There's a few things floating around. There's a price point floating around of $500. Who knows if that's true? But the rumors. That was the prediction that rumors will start, and they certainly did. Number 5, Spyro the Dragon Remaster would be announced at E3 or PSX. And so I'm like half right, because while Spyro the Dragon certainly was real, it was announced, it came out, it was not announced at E3 or PSX certainly. It did not have a first-year exclusivity with PlayStation, but it did exist. And I am somewhat slightly proud of this prediction because at the time I made that prediction, there was no buzz about a Spyro remaster whatsoever. This was just at the time of the Crash remaster. I said, you know what, Activision as a publisher is now looking at their older IP, and certainly Spyro would be right next to Crash. They understand that Crash did so well, so they're certainly going to explore a Spyro remaster as well. And they announced it, I think, in April, if I'm not mistaken, in 2018. It was like it just random, right? Just some sort of press release of the game just existing, and then being slated for PS4 and Xbox One. So half right on that one. I'm really disappointed that number 6 didn't come true. It's PlayStation 1 games come to PS4 with trophy support. So nice. You might want to give me a little credit here because, oh, hey, Parappa the Rapper came to PS4 and it was up-res and had trophies, and I think there was one or two other examples of that happening, but I mean, those are like very far and few between, right? Those are like basically ports, more or less, very highly up-res ports. I was kind of going more in the veins of the PlayStation 2 games on the PlayStation Store, where, you know, there's quite a handful of them, not many certainly, but, you know, that initiative sort of launched with at least 15 to 20 titles, and they were still pretty much the PlayStation 2 games. They were just slightly up-res, and they had trophy support, so I figured Sony would take that patent, because they had a patent on this, basically, about how they could add trophy support to old games, and they're just emulated. These games are not in any way, shape, or form natively ported to PlayStation 4, so even when you're opening menus on these games, there's a DualShock 2 menu and everything like that, right? And they found a way to get trophies to work on those games, and I thought, okay, well, for sure PS1 games make the most sense. We never got that. We got PlayStation Classic, but that's more of a nostalgia device more than anything else. Number 7, I was also unfortunately wrong. Number 7 was Firmware 6.0 would add PlayStation Store wish list, gifting games, a slight facelift of the UI, what else? Video chat, possibly VR video chat. You know, because really, what else could they sort of do, more or less? I think it was more so a situation of you'd maybe see a lot of quality of life updates come to the firmware, and again, something like virtual reality, right? I mean, why wouldn't they sort of want to explore that, especially with the popularity of VR chat? This didn't happen whatsoever. 6.0 was a total disappointment. It did nothing. Literally nothing. It was more so, I would assume, prep work or groundwork for PlayStation Network name changes that would eventually come, and those still aren't actually here yet in full force to the public. So 6.0 was totally disappointing, and I was totally wrong. Number 8 was kind of an easy prediction, but I basically said that nobody would care about PlayStation Now and PlayLink, and some of you may not even know what PlayLink is. PlayLink is an initiative that Sony does with more social games, more or less. So on the PS4 box art, it'll say it's a PlayLink game. These are games that are social experiences that typically require a smartphone app that you would download, which I believe all of them use the PlayStation app, if I'm not mistaken, on iOS and Android, but you'd use your smartphone and make decisions and stuff like that, or, you know, you'd play on there, right? There they got the That's You game that's on there. I can't even think of any other ones that, what's that other game, that horror game that is it's a PlayLink title? Well, anyway, nobody cared about those games whatsoever, I would have to assume, and same with PlayStation Now. And I was almost close to being like wrong about this, because PlayStation Now near the end of the year got that download function for PS4 games, so you could download the PS4 games locally to the hard drive, and that way you could play them locally as long as you had a PlayStation Now subscription active, and that was like a really good feature. I feel like that makes the service way more compelling than it ever did, simply as streaming. But sure enough, they're at 750 plus games. There's still no buzz, and that recent news story about how PlayStation Now accounts for 52% of subscription services, but it really, in all accounts, looks like it only makes about $150 million every quarter. It's pretty disappointing numbers when you know the games industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, so I think I was right there. Number 9, PlayStation VR support stays strong with consistent games being released and consistent support from Sony. And I was totally right about this because guess what? PlayStation VR games come out on a weekly basis. Sony constantly demonstrates tons of trailers, gives them blog posts, this, that, and the other. And, you know, it's funny because PlayStation VR is sort of reminding me now of PlayStation Vita in the veins of it's such a low-volume device, and it's really low volume because now we know that it's only around a little under 4 million units, and yet you're still seeing consistent games getting released, consistent developer support. Sony's certainly not letting it go anytime soon, and we know that they're certainly going to continue it on PlayStation 5. So I would say that I'm right. I mean, despite the fact that PlayStation VR sales may not seem very impressive to you, look at the store. Every week a VR game is coming out, whether it's big or small. And that's the thing too, is big games are still getting announced for it, and major games are getting VR modes and VR support. We're getting Ace Combat 7 in a few months, or is it this month? But it's still chugging along just nicely. Number 10, God of War and Detroit Become Human exceed calculations. They're up for multiple awards. I think this speaks for themselves, even more so God of War. Now, Detroit certainly did have a fair amount of attention, and I think was nominated for a few awards, but God of War certainly made many sweeps across all sorts of websites and award shows. So I don't even really know what to say other than, like, yeah, those games are really good. They're great IP. I mean, and, you know, these developers, I mean, Sony Santa Monica, Quantic Dream, and of course Sony's support and publishing and marketing really pushed these games, and they certainly did very well. So I think I did all right. The sales, I'm always pretty close with PlayStation 4. I'm a little off base with Vita. I'm very wrong with PlayStation VR. The games I did pretty good. Services, kinda. I mean, I don't know. You be the judge. I thought I was all right this year. Not my best year for sure. I think my best year was 2016 or 2017, but I don't remember for sure. But now let's get into 2019. This is the fun part. So what do I think Sony's going to do in 2019? Well, first we'll start with our sales predictions. Where do I think PlayStation 4 is going to be? And by the way, we are removing Vita finally because manufacturing is going to stop in 2019. It's not going to sell more than 50,000 units at this point before it's finally gone and off the market, more or less. I can't imagine it sells another 100,000 to tick up from 16.6 to it's 16.1 or something now. It's not going to tick up to 16.2. If it does, what does it matter? So we'll remove that finally from this year. Now we only have 2 platforms to predict, which is unfortunate, but I'm assuming 2020 we will be predicting PS5 sales. So anyway, I predict PlayStation 4 is going to be at around 106 million units. Now this would put it at a slower pace finally. It would slow down, but I was a little conflicted because with this, there's major PS4 games coming out this year. I mean, major system sellers. Like Death Stranding is probably going to be a system seller if it comes out in 2019. The Last of Us Part II, of course. Days Gone will certainly probably get some attention. Maybe Dreams, but that's certainly a stretch. We'll be talking about that in a second. But it's certainly going to slow down. So this is down from the rate of sale of what I predicted last year. So when I said it would make 90 million, that was about 20 million sales for the entire year. This would put it at, you know, them selling about 16 million units. So I think that's a somewhat fair place to put it, and I hope I'm correct. PlayStation VR, I'm going to say about 5 million units. I think it can't really do that much more. I think at some point, maybe closer to November, December, is where it will just barely reach 5 million, and you'd see some big blog post from Sony saying PSVR sales reach 5 million because it looks like it's doing about 1.5 or less every single year, and so I think that's kind of where it's going to fall. Now, I made a promise last year, I think, that I won't repeat predictions more than twice, and so now that I know Dreams will probably be coming out in 2019, here's my prediction, and my prediction is somewhat softer than the previous one, but Dreams reviews very well, but it has soft sales, so I'm lowering this a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to be a complete failure, but I think it's just going to come out, it's going to do okay in terms of sales, but it's not going to set the world on fire. I think it'll set the world on fire in terms of how good it is, you know, the creativity of it. I know the community is going to do some crazy good things with it, but you got to understand this game, the way it looks, the way it appeals to people. It's just not a mass market seller. This is not your God of War. This is not your Horizon Zero Dawn. Dreams, I can't see doing that well. I think it's probably going to sell less than Detroit Become Human, which, I think crossed over 2 million, right? So I can't imagine it doing more than that. Number 3, The Last of Us Part II comes out in the holiday season, and it includes a controversy. Yes, I'm going to make a bold statement here. Sure, the game's going to come out. I think it's going to do fantastic. It's going to sell a lot. It's going to review very well, I'm sure. But because this game has so much attention around it, and rightfully so, because it's The Last of Us, it did very well in 2013. It's regarded as one of the best games of all time by many people. And if you look at sort of the pre-release of this game, the trailers that we've seen so far, it's already being very divisive amongst many people. You're already seeing tons of articles, comments, discussions, debates, and it's all about, you know, many topics surrounding the game, whether that's the inclusion of women, Neil Druckmann's sort of approach to the game, the overt violence without context. I mean, these are all conversations that people are having. It's all this politics, and I think it's going to be a much bigger story when you see the game come out and the full content of the game is revealed. I think there's going to be something in there that's going to just set people off, and so that's why I don't want to make a prediction of like, oh, the game's going to come out, it's going to do fine. Sure it is, but I think there's going to be something in place in that game that's going to set the world on fire. Number 4, Death Stranding releases in the fall, and it reviews exceptionally well. Now, I know this is a bit crazy, given that so many people think the game certainly is going to slip into 2020, and it's getting to the point now where I think, you know, Hideo Kojima talks about the game on a daily basis. Norman Reedus made that offhanded statement of, oh, I think it's early 2019. He wouldn't know it's early 2019, but I think he has a general idea of it coming out at some time this year. So I think he's sort of off base with the 2019 early comment, and certainly the team internally is focusing on the later half, and I think it will be somewhere around the fall, because they do want to sort of line these games up in a way where they're not all releasing very close to each other. If The Last of Us is going to come out in the holidays, something has to come out in the fall. That could be Ghost of Tsushima, and it also could be Death Stranding. I think the game is probably, I mean, the team probably is really afraid to give a firm date, because they might not hit that date. But in the next few months, because Hideo talks about it so much, you may see more trailers, you may get an announcement of an actual date. I think they'll hit that date, and the game will come out and probably be incredible. And I think that the allure and mystery of the game is what fascinates and intrigues so many people. So when the game comes out and people sort of see whatever sort of unique design element that Hideo's sort of put into this game, I think it will be a situation where many of us are going to be thoroughly surprised at just how unique and different the game is. Number 5, PS4 firmwares are essentially over, and they are just boring, and you're never going to get any new features. I think that's it. I mean, 6.0 really kind of said it all. If there wasn't anything major in 6.0, and they're still taking their time with PlayStation name changes, and you've got to figure that a lot of their software team, the UI guys, everybody that's working on the PlayStation Network team and whatnot, they're all probably working on, I have to imagine most of that team has shifted over to PlayStation 5. So I think it's over. Don't expect any new features in 2019. Now, number 6 is many predictions. I didn't want to give all these their own separate one because they're too small, but I think all of these things will happen throughout the year of 2019 for Sony to just sort of instill some goodwill on PS4 owners and keep the system sort of alive and well beyond, well, not just for 2019, but well beyond 2019. So the PS1 Classics will come to the PlayStation Store finally. PlayStation Now gets aggressive with a library over 1,000 games, and PS Plus gets a minimum of 3 to 4 PS4 games, and that's because that we're going to be losing PlayStation 3 and Vita games in March, I believe. So they've got to, you would hope that they would up the ante with PlayStation Plus. Those PS1 games, I think, should come eventually, and I think they will also be a big part of PlayStation Now's library, so whatever games they start off with these PS1 Classics will also be a part of PlayStation Now, and that will bolster PlayStation Now's library over 1,000. I mean, Sony's not going to let PlayStation Now go. They're not going to. Everybody is talking about streaming, and when I say everybody, I'm talking about major publishers and hardware makers. Even though consumers don't want them, they keep doing it. So they're not going to let this go, and Sony's not going to let go either, given that they do have market leadership in that area. Now, here are my crazy ones, and I know there are zero rumors regarding this. However, if you look at the sort of timeline in Sony's history, I think this is sort of where we're going to fall. So number 7 is a PlayStation 4 Super Slim with an MSRP price cut down to $250. Now the system sees sales down to $250 and $200 very frequently, but there's no an official MSRP cut. I think it needs to come down to $250 in 2019, and the system can in fact get smaller. The design of hardware and movement of the case in the box and the internals inside, Sony messes with these constantly, and given the PlayStation 3 life cycle, that was the first time we saw 2 revisions of the console in one life cycle, and going back to that previous prediction, I think Sony has to bolster the PS4 life a little bit further. You've got all these exclusives coming. Give people a reason in terms of hardware too. Like, release a new PlayStation 4 with a lower price point for everybody to buy the system and play all these exclusives that you have coming out this year. History has shown Sony did another slim revision, so I think that is going to happen again with PlayStation 4, and it might happen probably, I think it wouldn't come till definitely the later half of the year, maybe closer to September, maybe November, December, but certainly I think that's where you're going to expect that. Which segues nicely into our next prediction, which is that I think a PS4 Pro Slim will also be announced, and that will feature an MSRP cut to $350. So again, you see PS4 Pros have sale prices to $350, but the system has never officially dropped to $350. It has to go down to $350. Prices drop, internals again and whatnot, the case and whatnot. The PS4 Pro can certainly use a little bit of a trim down. In fact, I think the PS4 Pro Slim is more likely than the PS4 Slim, but I think that's very likely. It has to, right? It's a low volume machine, sure. You've got to have this sort of reinvigoration of these platforms as we go into a new generation, or at the very least the announcement of one, where people may not be quick to buy a PS4 knowing that there's a PS5 coming the following year. Now it's time for the big predictions, the ones that you're all waiting for. So number 9, I think Sony will hold an event after E3, so this is well after July, revealing the PlayStation 5. It's its own independent event, and I think it will be more in lines of the PS4 reveal, which is that it'll be about an hour and a half, a 2-hour long event. You might not see hardware, but you'll see Mark Cerny take the stage. He will talk about the internals of the system. He'll probably show off the controller. You're going to see many third-party publishers and developers step on stage, vouch their support for the system, maybe announce a game or two, or announce a game that we currently know about is also coming to PlayStation 5, tech demos, if I didn't say that already. That's essentially what you're going to see, a PS4 reveal. You're not going to see a lot, but you're going to see enough to the point where, okay, the existence of this system is certainly real, and I think most rumors are going to be true as well, like going with AMD, PSVR technology baked in the box. You're not going to get a price, certainly, but I think that's mostly where we're going to find the system in 2019, which goes into our last prediction. I think PlayStation will hold a PSX in 2019, and I think that's where they're going to spend a larger portion of whatever conference they hold to show off more PlayStation 5. So you might see a greater look at the UI. You might see 1 or 2 game announcements. Might not be a lot of game announcements. You might see, good Lord, I'm not entirely sure. You might see what they're really trying to preach in terms of what they're doing with PlayStation VR, because I'm really not sure where PSVR will fall with PlayStation 5, if it will be a day-and-date sort of hardware launch with it, if it will be a peripheral that'll come maybe a year after PlayStation 5. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out. But I think they're going to do a good portion of PSX to really double down on PlayStation fans. So not only are you going to see tons of great stuff for PS4, but they're going to spend a lot of time at PSX showing you why PlayStation 5 is so great and why PlayStation as a brand is as powerful as ever and is not going away as we go into 2020, because at that point PSX is held around November, December, certainly. So that's right on the cusp of 2020. I think they're really going to go hard on that year and let the world know PlayStation is here to stay. All right, that's it. Those are my 2019 PlayStation predictions. Boy, oh boy. Exciting stuff, and the fun thing here, what I always love is that I want to hear your predictions, because that's what this is really all about. Tell me what you think about mine. What do you think is going to happen for 2019? It's going to be a big year. It really is. When you really think about it and how slow the last year was in terms of announcements, because Sony's been skipping and dodging all these press conferences from TGS to Gamescom, Paris Games Week. I mean, that's why they've been skipping all those, because it's building up to this point of major exclusives coming out in 2019 and a major hardware reveal as well. So it's going to be very exciting. And it's going to be great for this channel too, because we're going to be talking a lot of PlayStation. We're going to be doing a lot of coverage on all these games. So that's it for me in this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't yet, subscribe for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates here on YouTube. That's it for me in this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. You take it easy.